Your CV is your first impression on recruiters and hiring managers. However, what a good and professional CV should look like tends to vary from country to country. Today on the India to Germany podcast, Advait Valluri gives us his tips and suggestions on what a good CV should look like for job applications in Germany. Advait is a product manager in module management, chassis, powertrain, and autonomous driving at Audi in Germany. For many years, he has been reviewing job applications and CVs and advising applicants on how to structure their CV to maximize their chances of landing their dream job. Hi Advait, welcome to the India to Germany podcast again.
Hi, good morning, Paras. How are you?
Yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast again. Last time we spoke about your journey from India to Germany,
Correct.
your experience of living in Germany, and your advice for people living and working here.
Mm-hmm.
And this time we are going to talk about something different, which is also very, very important, which is the topic of job applications and CV and cover letter also.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I know, CVs are very, very important for job applications. It's the first impression on the employer for the employee. Why do you think that, what is your motivation for, let's say, talking about this topic?
Yeah, so after we did the last podcast together, maybe a couple of months ago, a lot of people started contacting me on LinkedIn, especially to get their documents checked for job applications. They were mostly students, but I also had some cases who were actually looking for proper jobs. And I started reviewing these documents and I started noticing that people were doing similar kind of mistakes. I wouldn't call them mistakes, but mistakes from the view of a recruiter, right? Everybody could have optimized their documents more or less in the same areas. And that's when I contacted you to do another podcast that, we can just put it up at a central location where people can refer to it. What are the common things you can avoid in your application documents, which will give you a better chance, to land a job. Yeah, that's pretty much the motivation to go ahead with this. And I hope today together we'll be able to give out some pointers to all aspiring applicants.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. First of all, it's great to hear that so many people contacted you. And I think it's also a very, very good idea to do something like this.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. CV is something that, also tends to vary from country to country, I feel.
Yeah.
I think in some countries it's different. In Germany, it's in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a very important topic. So how do you think we should go about this? I remember you suggested that we should maybe show a sample CV somehow.
Yeah, so since this is a podcast and we do not have the option of sharing a screen, I would suggest that we just hand over a sample document later. Like when you make the post, you just attach a sample document. But I can go through some points which I noticed through my review process for different people, and just give you an idea about how I would go about doing it. Of course, at the end. There is no perfect CV or there is no perfect application. There's going to be deficit in every application, but then at least this will give a good idea to people, and everybody can choose what is best for them, right?
Okay, yeah, sounds great. So I will add the link to the CV in the show notes. Yeah. So let's start with the scenario. I want to apply for a job in Germany, and I want to prepare my CV.
Yeah.
So let's start with the overall layout first.
Yeah.
What do you think the layout should look like?
Yeah. So the first thing in Germany is that CVs are typically a maximum length of 1 page, right? And Germans are not, at least this has been my experience, are not really big fans of reading long blocks of text, right? So they like bullet points a lot. And if you just look at the CV, they should understand what the candidate is, what is his background, and so on. because you need to remember that CV is always the first thing a recruiter or a potential employer is looking at.
True.
And the decision for them to either look further into your documents or not is most of the times made on the basis of the CV, which means the layout plays a very important role. That is, if you just look at a CV, it should be kind of appealing to the eyes, that all the important information which is required of a candidate should be immediately visible. Maybe I will give you a short example about how my CV currently looks, which we can also share later.
Okay.
If that's okay, I will just go through it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So what I did in my CV is that I have a picture of myself, and when I speak about a picture, a professionally shot photograph, a headshot, or something which is actually professional. It can't be a selfie which you took in front of a white wall or asked your friend to take it with poor lighting and so on. It should be a
Okay.
proper professional photograph, and it makes sense to invest in this because you can also get tax benefits out of it later. And
Okay, that's yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
And apart from that, on top, I have my name and a short description, like what am I? In my case, I've written engineer and innovation enthusiast, but you can write, I don't know, supply chain professional, data analyst, and so on, right? So you just give a short description of what your core competence is. And to the top right, I have my personal information like date of birth, place of birth, what is my current nationality, email address, telephone number, and if you have any social network profiles like LinkedIn, mostly LinkedIn, in fact.
All
And
right.
then, yeah, um,
So just a small questions there.
yeah,
So all this information, so it has to fit first of all into one page. It should not exceed one page.
yeah.
All right.
That should be the goal, at least. If it even up to 2 pages, it's okay. But yeah, 1 to 2 pages is the maximum. Exceeding beyond that, I think it's not a good idea in Germany.
And for the professional photo, I mean, where did you get this from? Do you remember?
Yeah, so you can go to any professional photographer, get like just tell him that you want to take photographs for applications, and they generally know what is to be done. And make sure you get a bill from them, Rechnung, and
Okay.
this you can put it up in your tax claims under the Werbungskosten, and
Oh,
you
nice.
can claim this money back because you are using it in order to acquire a job. So it can, you have tax benefits on these expenses.
Okay. And how much does it approximately cost? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I think if you just go and take a normal headshot, it will cost you for, taking 4 photographs. So they take it in a vertical format and horizontal format, black and white and color. So a total of 4 photographs completely post-processed by them, according to your wishes, will cost somewhere between 50 to 60 euros.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a bit expensive, but it's a one-time thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a one-time thing. You have tax benefits on it, and it gives a big boost to your CV. Many people underestimate it, but the photograph is the first thing, the physical appearance, which the recruiter sees. And if you have a smiling face, then you become more appealing automatically, right?
True.
Yeah.
True. Yeah. Human bias.
Correct, correct. Of course, there are studies which say that putting up a photograph or your gender is not a compulsion and people cannot discriminate you based on that. But in either case, you have to tell them at some point. So I would always prefer to do it at the very beginning so you stand better chances.
Yeah, I understand. All right. Okay. So yeah, let's go further.
Mhm. Okay, and what you most often see in German Job descriptions ist das, bitte bewerben Sie sich mit einem tabellarischen Lebenslauf. So what it roughly translates to is please apply with a tabular CV. So this is what I meant earlier with tabular CV. They require concise information, which is descriptive enough but not too long, right? You don't have to write a long sentence. You can just say, I've been working as a project leader, I manage resource and budget, and so on and so forth. So after the header, which I mentioned previously, with the personal information and photograph, my CV is next built up with the work experience, with all my prior job profiles, with the earliest one at the top.
Okay.
and I go down chronologically to as far as I started working. Now, this depends a little bit on if you, let's say, you held a lot of positions in the past, you have a lot of experience, so you may be having a lot of positions which you worked in the past. So you don't have to include everything. You can kind of consolidate the first 5 to 10 years together and say various positions, company XYZ, for example, and put the positions which are more relevant to the job you're applying to.
All right.
And what is important to mention is where did you work? What was your designation? What was the time span you worked there? And what was the location? And
Okay.
2 to 3 bullet points of the main responsibilities you had in this position. And that should pretty much do it for every job. And then you chronologically go down until your first job, basically.
Okay. So the important thing is to put the earliest job at the top and also maybe tailor them according to the application as well.
Correct.
Not just put a complete list and with a lot of text.
Yeah. Yeah, with earliest, I mean the current job, like the newest job, right? So what you're doing right now should be on the top, and what you did in the past should go towards the past chronologically downwards.
All right.
Yeah.
And I mean, just this just brings a question to my mind. I mean, when I, for example, want to write a CV, the first thing I do is I go on the internet and I look for like templates.
Mhm.
And you see now, for example, on even on Google Drive, there are templates for CVs which you
Yeah.
can just take. And some of them are very simple and minimal.
Mhm.
Others are, yeah, much more fancy. Do you have a suggestion there if one should go for this template or that template?
Yeah, definitely. So I would definitely choose a template which is a bit appealing. Now, what do I mean by appealing? So when I was doing the review process for some of the students, I got CVs which just had plain text in black and white, right? So it said education, nothing. For example, the headings of the subsections were not in bold text or were not capitalized. It was just plain text format, which becomes very difficult on the eyes to read, and it also becomes difficult for the recruiter to find the right information quickly, because you need to remember each recruiter is like screening hundreds of applications every day, and they do not have time to read through entire CV. So the moment they look at your CV, they need to find the right information for them to be able to assess if I go ahead or not with this candidate. And that's why I say it should be appealing, which means format it in such a way that sections are clear, and include a little bit of contrast in your CV. Like use a color. You need not make it too colorful, but at least use one or two colors for the headings, or use small icons to show what was work, what was education, and what are your strengths, weaknesses, your skills, and so on. And then order them in such a way that the first look at it will give a good feeling. Maybe it will be helpful for us to attach after the podcast even a template where I mean it is plain looking and dull looking, and an appealing template, so that your listeners can see the difference. What I mean by appealing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that would be very helpful.
Hmm.
All right. Okay, so we were at the work experience section. So there you already mentioned some very helpful pointers. So
Hmm.
what would you place after this section?
Yeah, so after the work, I would definitely add the education. Um, Now there are discussions, where do I start education, because everybody goes to school, right? So at this point, I have a clear recommendation to start including your education from your first professional degree. In my case, it is my bachelor's, for example, and then the master's. And if you did a PhD, maybe add a PhD. But in general, you do not have to include your schooling. If you have space, yes, maybe, or if it is particularly relevant for a certain position, like I don't know, you're applying as a teacher at a school, then maybe yes, so that they know which school you went to and so on. But if you're applying to normal professional jobs, a bachelor's degree and master's degree, important thing to mention in this section is what was the exact name of your degree, in what area it was, which university did you go to, and if needed, also the location of the university if it's not obvious, and also the timing, like what was the time period where you studied at this university. And one optional thing which you can include, and in my opinion, you should include, is the grade, right? So one thing I noticed is that students write the grade when they're applying for jobs in Germany in the Indian format or in the international format, wherever they got the degree. For example, 98%, 75%, and so on. So this is not immediately visible for a German recruiter what it actually means. So there are sources online where you can use your original grade and convert it to a German equivalent grade. I will always mention the German equivalent grade if you're applying in Germany, and mention maybe in brackets converted grade to German system or something like that.
Okay, that's very useful. That's a very important point. True. Yeah. Yeah. And again, these should be structured from, let's say, the most recent education to the oldest, maybe.
Correct, yeah. And the reason for also including the grade in the German system is that then you become easily comparable to another applicant who is, for example, from Germany, right? So it's easy for the recruiter to see, okay, in comparison to this candidate, this guy is so good. Because if you just put your Indian grade, they do not know how good or bad you are.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And should also a description of the degree itself, or what was done, what kind of projects, all
Mm-hmm.
this should also be described in this list, or do you think that's too much information?
No, I think you can at least add your thesis projects. So whatever you did for your master's thesis or your bachelor's thesis, you can add it there. What I did personally in my CV is that, of course, you have two options. You add it under each educational part. Like, for example, if you did a internship in your master's, then you add it under the master's section. But what I did is I just mentioned the two educations degrees that I got, and I used another section which is called industrial exposure, where I added my internship and my master's thesis. But you can choose where to add. But yes, it's a good question. You definitely need to mention what practical skills you acquired during your education, because that has a direct impact on also your job prospects.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, particularly for people who come straight out of the university, I guess this is the main thing for them. So,
Yeah, definitely.
all right. Okay. So, what other information would you suggest other than work experience and education?
Yeah, apart from this, like I mentioned earlier, any industrial exposure or any projects you did in your free time where you used, for example, to gain some extra knowledge or to build on your knowledge which you gained at the university, if you did some certification courses and so on, you can definitely add in a separate section. You can call it exposure or other experience and so on. I personally also add some of the volunteering work I do with a volunteer organization, and I also studied music, for example. So I add some extracurricular skills which I gain, which maybe do not have a direct connection to your job application, but which also give an idea about the person you are, right? So I add this also as part of it, but I don't elaborate on it. It's just one sentence: music degree, volunteering experience. Um, yeah.
True. Yeah, no, I think it definitely makes sense. I mean, what do you do outside of work? And
Yeah.
for the society also, it's a very important thing. Yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, there actually, I just remembered. So, what about languages? I mean, I guess people who speak German, particularly, it's
Hmm.
very important for them to also somehow mention their language skills.
Yeah. Yes. So mentioning the language skill on CV, especially in Germany, I think is paramount to a successful job application, because nowadays most German companies are slowly moving to English, but then German still is the core in the country, right? So, like I mentioned multiple times in my last podcast, knowing German is very important, and you should also show this on your CV, like how good your skills are. A normal way to mention languages, which I've come across quite often, is people use these, like, how do I say? They use a certain scaling system, but it's actually in words or in text format. Like, for example, English, they will say mother tongue, German, they will say very good, or Verhandlungssicher, or they will say some other language, Spanish, for example, they will call it fluent. Of course, this is one way of looking at it, but then the words will generally have different meanings for different people. So what I personally suggest is to use a scaling system. So, for example, you can have 5 circles or 5 stars and fill these up just like a Google review, a 5-star review or a 4-star review, and you fill up the number of stars you think how good you're in the language.
All right. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. True.
Mhm.
I
So for
guess.
my mother tongue, for example, I will fill all the stars because I grew up with it. And for other language where I'm not on the mother tongue level, maybe less, 4.5. And for a language which I just know the basics for, maybe 2 stars or something like that. Something on these lines will definitely be helpful, and it's easy for the recruiter to see. Okay, this guy is so good in this and this. So he doesn't have to reach too much text. At the end, you need to remember you're trying to minimize the effort of the recruiter to read your CV, but at the same time, tell him as much as you can about yourself. That should be the goal of a good CV.
Yeah, yeah. I guess if also someone has cleared exams, I don't know, the A1 exam or A2
Yeah,
exams,
definitely.
then they could also mention, okay, because
Yeah,
these are the European system of uh, evaluating languages.
correct. Yeah. So if somebody has given an exam for a particular language, then they can European frame of reference. They can definitely include this C1 level, C2 level, A1, A2, whatever it is. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Otherwise, I never thought about this. Yeah, to kind of make it more visual and look in, yeah, I don't know, in terms of circles or stars or
Mhm.
something, and then highlighting how many. That's a very good idea because it can straight away give you a visual comparison between, okay, this guy or this girl, this person.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. That's a great suggestion. Yeah. Okay. And is there any other information that you would suggest other than this?
Yeah, so apart from these, I mean, this should, in my opinion, be on every CV. And then some sections you can include based on the job, right? So one of the most important skills which recruiters look for now is how good are your computer skills? Like, can you use Microsoft Office, or do you have knowledge in any special software which is, for example, required for a particular position? I will also include this. And if it has a huge bearing on the success of the job application, then I would also include a scale for this, right? Just similar to the languages. But in my case, I just included the software I work with and I know and I'm confident in, and that's it. I never put a scale on it. Another thing I can recommend students to do or applicants to do is to maybe include 3 or 4 keywords what you think are your strengths. I can give you an example from mine. So I just wrote project management, intercultural competence, quick learner, strong communicator, and so on. So maybe 2 or 3 of these words will portray yourself as a person. Without the recruiter having to meet you, they know what they can expect if they talk to you.
And where would you suggest to include this?
In one small section on the CV. So I did my CV such that it has 2 columns. So it's a 2-column CV. On the left column, I have included my work experience and education. And on the right column, I've included sections like language, computer skills, strengths, industrial exposure, and so on. But
Okay.
of course, there are many templates on the internet available. I'm not saying this is the best or the worst. You can use any template, but make sure you include this information and you stay within the 2-page limit
Yeah.
and still make it look appealing. So if you take care of this, it doesn't matter where you include it.
Yeah. So yeah, one could, for example, add it also under the skills section, also, yeah,
Yeah,
project
definitely.
management and
Yeah,
communication skills.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very important. It also brings me to another thought. So yeah, it's often known that people tend to exaggerate things. I mean, everyone might, or it's often known that people tend to exaggerate slightly their own
Hmm.
skills and their abilities in their CV.
Hmm.
Do you think this is a good idea? And if so, or if not, to what extent?
Mm, to be very frank, I wouldn't recommend doing this. Um, at least if you really want to do it, then keep it within bounds, because let's say you write something on your CV and you get a call for an interview based on this information, right? And if the recruiter for some reason decides to test you on it, and then they notice that what you have actually written on the CV is not true, then you make a really bad impression, and this information could be passed on to other recruiters within the company. So your chances of getting recruited in that particular company might go down. And it also reduces the credibility of the person in general. So be honest in your CV. If you feel that you are more capable than what you write on your CV, you can definitely mention it in the cover letter that you're willing to learn, that you're a quick learner, and give them some examples where you have proven that. But I wouldn't unnecessarily kind of exaggerate on the CV. I think it's not a good idea.
Okay, so
Even
it's
for yourself, you're not being fair to yourself, right? So you need to be accepting of who you are and willing to learn. I think that is a better position to be in than trying to portray yourself as somebody you're not.
yeah, yeah. So it's important to sort of also back up with examples, or yeah, this what you said also with this willingness to learn.
Yeah,
Yeah, not just put statements out there and not be able to back them up with
correct.
examples.
Yeah, so maybe we can look at this in the next episode where we talk about the cover letter, and maybe there I can give you some pointers about how you can, write stuff in your letter with examples.
All right, sure. Yeah, that's a good idea. So, is there any other information that you think the people should include in the CV other than the ones that you mentioned?
Yeah, maybe the one last thing I would mention, it's optional, it's left to the candidate, is to include some personal interests. Like, what would you like to do? What are your hobbies? You can either write it down or include logos to make it a bit more visual. I'm going to put up one of the templates. You can see that I included some of my interests, so for example, cooking, football, and traveling. And I put small logos for that, so they are self-explanatory. I don't have to tell that I'm interested in cooking. You just look at it and you know, okay, this guy is interested in cooking, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Apart from that, maybe so this was related to content, and what I would also recommend, or at least suggest the candidates to look at, is to use formatting, proper formatting, like use the right font size and change the font size depending on the section title or the job title and the description. Use different font sizes if needed, different font formattings, like the section title can be in bold and the normal description can be in normal text. And if needed, use a different color so it comes to the foreground. And also make sure, like, get it read by somebody. Don't make grammatical errors on the CV, right? So this is very important to know. If you're applying in German, especially, I'm sure English everybody will be writing well, but don't make grammatical errors. Like in Germany, people are very, very strict. And I wouldn't say strict, but they are very, very careful, or at least very observant about grammatical errors. Like, for example, I notice very often that people put a comma and don't add a space after a comma, or people put a full stop and don't start with the capital letter the next sentence, and they don't put a space after the full stop. These are small things. It does not contribute to any loss of information, but it makes a very bad impression. So you need to take care about that as well.
All right. And in terms of the language of the document itself, so
Mhm.
do you think, would you recommend to have a CV in German or in English?
So my first answer to this would be, if you really speak German, then do it in German. If not, in English. But if you do not speak German and apply in German, that is not a good idea in my opinion. Because the moment you apply in German, people think, okay, he can speak, or he or she, the person can speak German, right? And another way to decide which language to use on your CV is to see at the job description itself. So if the job description was in English, it is kind of a sign that you can apply in English because the job is going to be in English. And if it was in German, I would definitely apply in German if you speak German. If not, stick to English. But stick to the language you're most comfortable with.
That's true. Okay, that's a very good advice as well. Okay, so Advait, we already covered most of the content in the CV. In
Mhm.
terms of formatting or other pointers, do you have any other suggestions there?
Yeah, so one thing which comes to my mind is the formatting of the date. So in Germany, it's always date, dot, month, dot, year, right? So make sure you stick to this format, or at least if you're not, then at least use the month and the year. And if you want to abbreviate the months. Let's say you want to write September, then make sure you write SEP dot space the year, for example, right? So formatting the date correctly is a helpful thing. Apart from that, make sure that whenever you include email addresses or links to your social networking profiles, that they work. So once you compile your document and open your PDF, make sure that the link works and it's really opening into an email or into your LinkedIn profile. And do not use these cryptic links which you get from the social networks directly on the CV. Try to use an alias.
Okay,
Right?
so what kind of an alias?
So, for example, my LinkedIn profile will say, I don't know, www.linkedin.com/Advait Valluri/something else, right? So if you post this directly in your CV, it looks very, very bad for the reader. It looks like some link which has been posted.
Yeah.
So I would put this link in the background, but call this as LinkedIn, for example.
All right, I understand. Yeah.
So if I click on that LinkedIn, it opens my LinkedIn profile, but it doesn't show the actual link.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. So basically a text and in the background is a link.
Correct. Yeah. And apart from that, like I mentioned, stick to 1 or 2 pages. And if you feel there's too much information, which you have a lot of experience, then try to omit information which is not really relevant for the particular position. So you need to remember you're always writing a CV for each particular position. Although in most cases you can like recycle your CV, but still you need to remember it has to be position specific. So you can omit stuff which is not relevant.
Yeah, that's a very good thing also. True. Very true. Yeah, that's a lot of very, very useful information, a lot of very useful advice. Thank you very much, Advait, for, first of all, suggesting that we should do this episode and then giving so much useful information.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be part of it, and I will be very happy if it helps people. And like I mentioned, we can add 2 templates, one normal plain template and the other a bit creative or an appealing template, so that the students or the listeners can get an idea about what we spoke about.
Great. Okay. And I look forward to doing another episode with you on the cover letter.
Yes, definitely, Paras. Thank you very much for your time, and see you soon.
Yeah, thank you very much as well. That's all, folks. Remember to subscribe to our podcast and check out our blog on indiatogermany.com. See you in the next episode.